Welcome to the Worship Keys YouTube channel. My name is Carson Bruce. So glad you're here. We talk all things music theory, gear, industry, and ministry for your worship keys playing. If this episode is beneficial for you or you have any questions as you continue to watch, feel free to comment below, and I'd love to hear any feedback that you have along the way. So let's get into today's episode. I'm with Evan Fernald. Evan, welcome to the podcast, man.
Thank you for having me. I'm so honored to be here.
Many of you know him, recognize him, and you actually look like a Christian artist. Have you gotten this before?
Depends on the artist you're about to say, but possibly, yeah.
Jeremy Camp?
Yep.
Okay.
I could have said it, yeah. No, I've gotten that a few times.
Okay. Well, man, you're styling. You look great. Jeremy Camp's awesome too. Man, what a great guy. Evan Fernald, he plays keys at the Belonging Co. But you don't just play keys at Belonging Co. You're the MD, and you've been on staff for some years. So tell us that story. How'd you get connected with the Belonging Co.?
Yeah, man, it's quite a long story that I won't go into all the details. My wife and I had been in full-time ministry for a number of years, really just kind of felt drawn into a new season, a season of rest. Very much did not feel like we were done with ministry, but just kind of felt like we needed to kind of hit pause. We actually heard about the Belonging through a family that we knew from one of our previous churches. They had moved to Nashville and had started coming. And so we stepped out of a season of ministry living in Northern California and got a chance to come and visit, and just very much felt drawn to what God was doing at the Belonging. And so we just felt the green light from God to come out. So sold a bunch of stuff off, moved out in the summer of 2017. And really that kicked off about a 3-year season of God doing so much in our hearts, and specifically in me. I know I didn't realize, and I think that this can be very common in ministry, how much my identity had been wrapped up in what I was doing for God, that I really had lost sight of what it meant to just be a son of God, and for him to be my father and not just my boss. Right? Ministry is like, yeah, God's who I work for, right? Yeah. And that was such an important thing for me to have to realize. And I think that I probably would not have realized it if it wouldn't have been for the space of stepping out. And God, it was kind of a come away with me season of God going, listen, you don't even see that you need this, but you need this. Right. And because I love you, and I know it's best for you, I'm actually going to pull you into a community that's passionate for my presence, that prioritizes what that looks like to actually find your identity in me and not in what you're doing for me. So it was such a challenging season, an incredible season. I've never felt God's presence so rich and close than I did in those seasons. And I started driving Lyft and around town, and man, talk about a confronting thing when you're driving and you're used to having all of these things that you can attach to your name that gives you some sort of perceived value. Oh yeah, no, I'm leading worship over here, I'm playing over here, I'm doing this, look at all those great things I'm a part of. And then all of that kind of gets stripped away, and you're like, right now I'm a Lyft driver. And, every passenger that gets in your car, very typical, is this your main thing? Is this your side gig? What are you doing? And I just remember having to kind of get to that place of being like, I'm not, a Lyft driver is not who I am. It's what I'm doing right now. Right. But I'm a son of God, and that's enough. And that's really the substance of how I want to live the rest of my life, from that identity, from that perspective. Yeah. And so after being at church, we just attended for the first year. And I think those are sometimes important seasons, right? As much as we absolutely believe in getting invested in a church community and serving and, being a part of, if it's, small groups or whatever that looks like, that's all very, very important. But there was this very unique season where God was like, I actually need your full attention. And I know that if you step right into doing all of that, you're not going to get a chance to see what needs to be worked on. Right. And so that first year was definitely a year of experiencing that and reconnecting that identity as being a son of God first and foremost, and that being it, getting to the point of going, hey, because nobody knew us at the Belonging, and outside of this one family, we didn't know anybody. Wow. And so, we didn't come with any kind of expectation to serve on the worship team or be on staff. In fact, we told a lot of our family and friends specifically those two things. I'm like, no, that will probably never happen at the Belonging. But that's okay. That's not why we're here. We're here because we want to be part of a community that's hungry for the presence of God. I'll set up chairs. I'll go park cars. I'd like sincerely getting to the place of going, if I never step foot behind an instrument or behind a microphone or on a platform, that I'm good with it. I'm fine. I don't need that anymore for my own value or identity. All that is found in my Father. Wow. And so whenever I did get the opportunity, started serving first in youth. They had just made the swap to doing like home group kind of youth ministry to the Wednesday night youth service. Let's get worship rolling. Yeah. And somehow my name kind of came up with the youth pastor at the time. And so I reached out and said, hey, would you be interested in being a part of this? Started playing for youth. Very soon after that, they wanted to start worship for the elementary kids service on Sunday mornings. And I got to step into doing that and was having a blast. Like genuinely, the fact that I was even getting to serve in worship, I felt like was such a gift from God, because I didn't expect to get to step back into doing that. So then probably beginning of 2019, started serving on the worship team for the adult services on Sundays and Tuesdays. Yeah, just really got to lean into serving on the team in that way. And it's been beautiful. Yeah.
That's awesome to hear. I didn't expect that. When you see you now, you just never know people's stories, and it's incredible. You're a great keys player. This episode's going to be awesome. It's actually going to be 2-part series. So today and next week, and depending on when you watch this video or hear this podcast, maybe both of them will already be out. But today's episode's all about your sound design and your whole rig, man. It's impressive. I mean, we were setting up today, and I was like, that was the quickest I've ever set up for a guest so far, because your rack was just ready to go, plug and play. Talk a little bit about your rack over there, what you got going on, and how you, when you go travel, what you do. Just real quick.
Yeah, so it's not super elaborate. There's just audio interface. Right now I'm using the UA Volt 4 for my keys interface. I have an iConnect MIDI 4 for MIDI routing on my iPad and fader controller. I'll do a quick little blurb on the MIDI 4. It's discontinued. They don't make it anymore, but it is so packed full of features, specifically the fact that you have multiple USB ports on it. It is such a hub for my workflow. So if that ever went down, I've literally been on Reverb and have bought like any used ones that pop up, people getting rid of them. I'm like, I'll snag them and have backups because it's so integral to my workflow, because it allows me with my iPad and fader controller to control both my keys computer and tracks. When we're playing on Sunday in Nashville, we have a playback team that runs tracks from side stage. But anytime we travel, if we do anything at the other locations, I'm usually running tracks from keys. And so having that built into my workflow without having to have a bunch of extra devices or having to like turn and interact with the tracks computer on the side table is really, really helpful. So iConnect MIDI 4, they're amazing. For tracks, when we travel, it is in my rack, only used for tracks when we kind of take trips. So it's the iConnect Play Audio 12, really popular and great playback interface.
Yes.
And that's essentially what's happening in the rack.
Very cool.
The iPad, I'm using Touch OSC, which is virtual MIDI controller software. So you can kind of build whatever template.
Super cool.
Buttons, knobs, anything that you need, you can kind of custom build your layout. And then I have a fader controller that can kind of controls all my levels and effects and all the things that would manipulate my sounds and also kind of control tracks world. So
good. And we're about to see that here. And if you're listening on podcast, you're on the road and just enjoying the conversation, enjoying some of the sound design, I hope you enjoy it. Definitely don't watch if you're driving or anything, but this is probably, these few episodes are going to be something you're probably going to want to watch on YouTube. So feel free to cross on over to YouTube and check this out. Evan, on staff at the Belonging Co. here in Nashville, Tennessee. Tell us your role. So you are doing tracks, a lot of keys, but you're MDing on stage too. And we've had a few episodes about MDing and MD tips. Talk a little bit about MD World and your role specifically at the Belonging Co. And you're full-time there, right?
I am, yes. So just about 4 years now, I've been full-time on staff as a music director. It's such a privilege to get to work with all of our worship teams and bands. And so lots of, if you've been in that role on staff at a church before, there's lots of just back-end details, scheduling things that take up quite a bit of time. Yeah, when it comes to our services, definitely partner very much with our worship leaders. We actually have our worship leaders. Most all of them are all volunteer. There's only a couple that are also on staff, but they build their own set lists. And so it's a little bit of a unique dynamic in my case where I could be working with 2 volunteer worship leaders that have built their set list, but I'm also the staff representation for the worship department. So kind of a little bit of a dual hat, making sure that everything comes together well for the service. But I view kind of the MD role as definitely a support role to the worship leaders. Like, you're the ones that have built the set. The expectation is to come with vision and to, to have a sense of how you want this to go. And so I want to be able to support that and understand, even when it comes to just transitions, flow moments, how can I help set this up? Do we want to just do this song and then move right into this next moment? Do we want to hang out a little bit after this first song to kind of see where it lands? I'm working a lot with our worship leaders, asking the questions, what are you thinking? What are you feeling? And then I'm ultimately responsible to make sure all the musical elements are coming together to support kind of that vision.
Absolutely.
So, yeah.
Really, really cool. Talk a little bit about the culture at your church. Talk about your pastors, and kind of their vision for the church. And if you know about Belonging Co., you've never been to Belonging Co., you might know that they have incredible production, audio, visuals, lighting, and it's prioritized. But at the same time, they do love the Lord. Sometimes you think if you have great production, maybe you're idolizing that, and maybe a smaller church with no production just means they really love the Lord. But that's not always the case.
Yeah.
Talk a little bit about the church culture and
Yeah.
your pastor and why the production is such a high standard.
Yes. Our pastor is an incredible creative.
Yeah.
Musician, worship leader, producer, audio engineer. From visual side, photographer, like all the things, he's just embodies a creative individual and cares very deeply about those things. But the thing that I love most about our pastors is, and you even said it, is keeping the priorities in the right place. Mm-hmm. I think sometimes in conversations around church, these things can get elevated or even thrown out when they're not in the right order. We see production getting the predominant place in the service. And you go, well, that just feels out of whack. Let's throw it all away. Or other churches that don't utilize it at all. And I just love that our approach really is those things can be useful as long as they don't take the front seat, Mm-hmm. We have kind of a manifesto around the church. It's presence over presentation, intimacy over industry, people over position, encounter over entertainment, and Jesus over everything. Wow. And the presence over presentation is really where that conversation kind of comes down to is it's not present instead of, like, we don't pull all of that out of the equation.
Sure.
We just make sure it doesn't become the main thing.
Yeah.
And honestly, it's the first place that I've heard production being talked about from the standpoint of it being a part of our creative expression of worship, right? Like I've come from different church environments where everything that's done is done with, is it going to connect with the people, right? And not that conversation is bad or that framework is bad, but I had never heard about lighting being talked about as a creative expression of worship. God created light. We're using elements that he created to create a space that's worshipful and inviting. Yeah. And like, that's incredible. Yeah. If you're coming from that standpoint and that's the way you're utilizing it, that alone, that value, I think, gives you that threshold of not turning it into concert or show or flashy or so overdone that it's now distracting. Now our attention is on the production elements, not on being invited into an experience of worship.
Absolutely.
So I think it's really cool. I had, what's interesting is before I came to Belonging, I had some stronger opinions about things. Honestly, tracks was one of them, where I felt very strongly that I didn't want to hear anything in tracks that was so prevalent but it wasn't being played by a live person on stage.
Gotcha, yeah.
Which honestly even ties into when I first started getting into like the world of keys and sound design. I was trying to copy and produce so much of the parts live.
Right.
So the only thing I left in tracks was really, supplementary. It was kind of, you couldn't really hear it predominantly. And When we first came to the Belonging, I remember being in services, and it was, I couldn't even tell you how long it was before I found myself going, I don't even care. Like on the side of the person being in the room worshiping, it was so much more about entering into this atmosphere of worship and participating. I'm like, I don't care if the hook that I'm hearing right now is coming from a laptop or from the person that's like, play it live, put it on the track. Like, I don't care. It doesn't change my engagement in this moment. And so some things shifted for me in that time of going, yeah, utilize production elements. Don't use them. If the heart is in the right place, you can use it and it's not out of place. Yeah. If your heart's not in the right place, you can be using it and it's a distraction. So we focus so much on the thing as opposed to our heart posture and how we're approaching it and letting that be the most important part. Cool. So, I think that's one thing that I really appreciate about our house is we utilize all of the things, but everything is kept in the right order. Everything is subject to what's happening in the moment, what God is speaking in the moment. If He wants to, interrupt the set list we've put together and go a different direction, that we are ready. All the systems that we have, all the technology, the musical elements, everything is ready to follow that. Amazing. So we're never handcuffed by the technology. All the technology and production elements supports the moment.
I love that. I want people to hear that too, because it is always starts with the heart of it. And this platform is called the Worship Keys. We're not just about keys. It's worship first. And that's what it's all about. So we're going to hear some very technical things this episode and the next episode with you, Evan. But I wanted people to hear your heart in that and hear the heart of the Belonging Co. as well and how they approach production. That, hey, these lighting techs, these camera techs, all of these people are doing it unto the Lord. Maybe not every single one, every single time. There could be some, you can't quality control everyone, but for the most part, that's their vision and that's what you guys want to do, which is awesome. I do want to ask, so at Belonging Co., there's a lot of quote unquote high profile Christian artists leading at the Belonging Co. Yeah. Does that affect anything? Because it really shouldn't, it's their church. They want to be a part. I've heard from a few buddies, hey, like they're just here to have church. They're not here to sign autographs, and we're not doing that whole thing. They're here with their family, with their spouses. Does that affect you individually or the staff or the perception?
I'll comment first on just the overall kind of culture and environment of the church. Nobody is on the platform because of their name. There's nobody that's just given a microphone and a place on the worship team because they are so-and-so.
Right. That's good.
Every single one of them is there because, like you said, it's their church. They're there to serve. They get a planning center request just like anybody else on the team. They're not paid. There's kind of this saying too, where it's like everybody checks their name at the door when they walk in because we're all about Jesus. So nobody is there. Honestly, they don't need more platform time. It's like if you think about it, an artist that's actually like doing well in their career, they don't need another platform to sing on. Like they've got plenty of opportunities. So none of them are there for that reason. And it's honestly a delight that I get to say that, having interacted and know many of them. I know that's their heart. In fact, I remember when we first started coming, Danny started, his first place serving was parking cars. I remember I pulled into the parking lot one time, and as I was driving past, I was like, I'm pretty sure that was Danny Goki out there with a vest, parking cars. It just shows the heart of why they're there. Like nobody's there to hold a microphone. No one's there to get stage time. They're there because they value what our house is about. It's their community. It's their home. And speaking for myself, just on the personal side, I had never been in close proximity to anybody in that category when I first started serving on the team.
Even though you look like Jeremy Camp.
even though, yeah. It was something I had to kind of figure out for myself. And I want to say this: it wasn't because of anything they said or did. I think in ourselves sometimes we put people into a category of like, I can't talk to them because they're so and so. I don't want to bother. They've never said anything to make anybody feel that way. But like doing it to yourself of going like, is it okay to go talk? And I think for me, it was just like, I'm here. I'm not here because of them. I'm not here to try and get close with them. Right. So I just navigate this like literally anybody else. If I was getting to know anybody else and wanted to develop friendship with anybody else, how would that go?
Mm-hmm.
And don't get in my own head and put them into a place that they're not even putting themselves.
Right.
They're not asking to be put. So I think in a lot of those cases, it actually comes down more to us and how we're thinking of people. You know, we put people in the celebrity status, and it's like, these are people that love Jesus. You said they're here with their families, they're attending church, they're part of the community, and don't want to be treated differently. So, that was just kind of something I had to internally figure out.
I love that, man. No, thanks for sharing that. Thanks for sharing. So before we jump into this first episode right here with Evan Fernald from Belonging Co., tell us a little bit of the why and kind of intro us into this world of sound design.
Like I mentioned before, when I first was kind of getting into this world, I kind of took it as a sense of pride to like tackle as much as I could. I wanted to play all the parts and do all the things and have all the sounds. And when I first started serving at the Belonging is when a lot of that changed, as literally standing on stage, setting up for a sound check and getting a text message that, hey, we're actually got to change song 1. We're doing this one instead. And just, we're sound checking in 15 minutes and you just got to be ready to pivot.
Right.
And I was like, well, I don't have those patches pulled in, whatever the case may be. Realizing just the time that you had to work with pivots and changes and everything, I was kind of like, I don't really know that I've got, enough time to really dig into having so much song-specific, patches and sounds. Right. And then the second component of that was I had come from many years of leading worship teams, running rehearsals, directing bands. So I was comfortable in that world, but I had never actually done kind of that live MD role where you've got the talkback mic, you're calling changes to the band, you're following worship leader cues, and you're counting everything in and kind of being that hub of information. Yes. And so realizing that there's an element of focus and concentration that has to be allocated for doing that well. Mm-hmm. And when I was able to do that well, the impact on the whole team and the whole moment, like that had a stronger payoff than whether or not I had all the tones.
That's good.
And then that paired with my newfound realization that like we can leave a hook in tracks and it's great, Yeah. It was all of those elements coming together that I was like, you know what? I think I need to simplify what I'm doing here. Just be intentional on having a few things that work for 90% of the time. Solid piano sounds, maybe 1 or 2. Solid pad sound, maybe a synth or 2. And then a ways to kind of manipulate that as we're kind of flowing dynamically. I needed ways that I could, with one button push or one fader knob, with very minimal interaction, make the changes I needed to make, because when you're MDing, it's so important that you can stay attentive to what's happening. And I think we can miss a lot if we start getting into places where we're having to like literally physically look at our keyboard, look at our gear, look side stage to the laptops. You're changing this. There could have been 3 cues that happened that I completely missed because my head was down. So just the idea of being able to play and lead with your head up has influenced so much of what's gone into this. A lot of my on-the-fly changes is a button, one fader move, one knob move. It's very minimal but intentional to be able to support my role, not just as a player, but also as an MD.
Man, that's great. Well, let's get into it, man. You take it away, Evan. Take it away.
All right, so let's take a look at what this looks like. So let's start up here. This is kind of the main hub for controlling everything, really. The iPad here, I've got a lot of my notes for the songs, chord structures, dynamic notes, band notes, things like that just kind of help me remember arrangements and any kind of little nuances there. This is my keys session, so this only has keys control. I have another one that also controls tracks if I'm doing that, if I'm running tracks while I'm playing. But this gives me a few extra buttons that are keys specific. So starting with the topper up here, this is the kind of the drone ambient pad I can turn on or off. And each song has its own page, and the button is pre-programmed to whatever key we're doing that song in. It's also just a quick visual reminder of what key we're going to play in. So that's really, really helpful. The rest of these across all pages are the same, and it's just my go-to piano sound and pad sound, so I can quickly turn those on or off. So starting with off, we'll kind of turn the piano on here. Kind of hear that. And then I can turn the pad on and bring that in, add the piano to it. So those are the main two sounds that I would use. And then we can add the drone in here too. And we can kind of bring this in together. So that's kind of all three combined together. I'm always really, really super aware, and this is something that's really helpful for like front of house, your audio guys, as they're mixing in the room. Sometimes we'll actually split out the drone pad separate from the pad that I'm playing so that they can mix those independently in the house. Because sometimes it's a little bit tricky to tell in our ears, if we're using in-ears, how the balance of those two is sounding out in the house. So it kind of helps front of house guys be able to mix that in a way that's pleasing. In this case, I'm running an interface right now that doesn't have enough outputs to do that. So I'm actually combining the pad that I'm playing with the drone. So I am always very aware of the blend between those two. And I'll give you an example of what it might feel like if it was out of balance. So we've got the drone really raging. I'm playing the pad, but you really can't tell what I'm playing. You can't hear what I'm playing. And so this might be very aggressive in the room. It's like overpowering with the drone, and we can't really hear any definition of chord changes. So I'm going to want to kind of be aware of that. Bring my pad in a little more. Take the drone down a little bit. So now you can hear the chord changes that are happening underneath that drone. If you are in a similar situation where you're using an interface that doesn't allow you to separate those two, just having a way to be able to balance those quickly and be aware is really helpful for our audio teams and out in the room. Let's take a look at a couple other little sounds here. We'll look a little more in detail about some of the things that are happening in my session over here. Really, I don't have a ton of sounds that I want to kind of cycle between. I usually have like a go-to upright based sound, and then something that's a little more of kind of a grand vibe, which is a little brighter, maybe a little more aggressive. So if we're doing something that kind of needs that kind of energy. I don't use the grand a ton, but it's there. I'd like to have it and not need it, then need it and not have it. So it stays in my session. And then the other pad that I'll go to occasionally it's got a little bit more energy to it the more you open up the filter. It's kind of got almost like this piercing lead. So we'll add the piano into that. So that's, you can kind of hear that top note really kind of cutting through. So I'm really aware when I'm pulling this sound out, the chord voicings, not adding too many notes. That pad can really walk over itself quite a bit if I start adding too many voices without letting up on that sustain pedal. So I got to really be careful whenever I bring that one in, but it really adds a lot of cool energy, really big moments. So I'll play a lot simpler chord voicings, but very intentional, specifically with the right hand, what lead notes I'm kind of bringing out in that. So those are really kind of my main go-to sounds that just live in my session that I'll pull in and out on a given Sunday. Let's look over here at what's happening in the session a little bit. So I have two main, if you're familiar with Ableton, these are called instrument racks. So it's a MIDI channel that hosts multiple plugins or piano instruments. And then we'll look at this one in a little more detail in a second. This handles all of the Nord MIDI and audio, but we'll come back to that. So this here, my main piano, I love. A couple years ago, I started getting into layering, piano layering, which can be really fun. It takes digging a little bit because not all pianos will layer very well. You have to find a couple that complement each other, that sit well together. But it gives you a chance to kind of come up with something a little bit unique. And so my main piano sound right now is a combination of Native Instruments, Nor, and I'll be honest, I don't know how to say that properly. I might be mispronouncing it, but it's that piano. And we'll kind of hear what that sounds like just by itself. Let me solo that dude up. Turn the piano on. There we go. So it's actually a grand. Okay. Pretty great sounding grand. And then this Woodchester upright, which has been really fun to play around with. It's a real kind of vibey upright. And by itself, I probably wouldn't necessarily run this by itself most times, but it's sitting on top of the grand. You kind of get that felty attack, a little bit of the warmth from that upright. So it just kind of landed in a cool space, and that's kind of been what I've been rolling with lately. That grand is also kind of over here. I have two different kind of versions of this. The one that's kind of loaded up right now it incorporates a Nord piano, which again, we'll look at a little bit more in detail here in a second. But if I'm in a situation where maybe I don't have a Nord and I'm just fully dependent on my my laptop, then I've got an additional layer here. That's actually that's the keyscape. We'll add the Nord on top of it. So it's both of those kind of layered together. Reason why layering can be kind of cool is you can kind of customize each layer with what you want it to do. So what I'll do a lot of times with my like a keyscape, the C7, which is a great sounding piano, but I will actually limit the velocity a bit. I want to look at this in a little more detail because this is really cool. Limit the velocity, which keeps it from really getting super, super bright and lets it kind of live in this kind of warm foundational space. So if you have a piano that's maybe a brighter, more vibe, but it doesn't really carry a lot of warmth or sustain, you can kind of use one piano to give you that warmth and the other one to give you the character. Similar to what we're doing with like the Nor and the Woodchester. That's kind of what this is doing with the Keyscape C7 and the Nor Grand. The Nor is going to be brighter, a little more bitey, but not as warm as the C7. So the C7 has given us a little bit of warmth. That's kind of a look at piano layering, which can be a lot of fun. So play around with that. I'm going to come back to the Nord. Let's look at the pads really quick. So there's a couple things that we're doing here. The main pad sound is a combination of, it's kind of a similar principle you'll notice here. So I'm using this Juno pad sample that I made that is kind of a warmer sound. And then I have this Omnisphere pad. It's got a little more kind of mid-range top into it. So to get together, they kind of give me this nice full sound that's still got some nice top in if I really open this up. The one thing I want to look at here is this particular knob right here. One thing that I used to kind of struggle with a little bit was finding the right like attack and release settings on the pads, to where if we were doing a song with a faster tempo and I wanted the chord changes to be a little more like defined, not as much of a release tail, so you didn't have like the pad building up on itself. But then when we got really, slowed things down, I just wanted it to kind of be a little more smooth. Kind of wanted it to be a slower attack and a longer release. And so what I ended up doing is I have a output chain for my pads here. And in that chain, I have an additional plugin that's mapped to this knob. And so as I twist this knob, I can I can run any pad that's coming from any of my pad channel will run through this same reverb, and it increases the decay of the reverb. And there's a little bit of low end that's cut out of this as well. And so that's going to actually soften the attack and extend the release in the form of a reverb trail. And that actually is really helpful because as piano players, a lot of times we love to kind of embellish, maybe play some melodic stuff. But if our pad is really defined underneath those piano notes, it can also start to build up in a way that's not super great. Like you feel that out in the house, it gets really muddy. So by softening that pad, it lets me actually be a little more melodic on the keys. I still kind of have this warm foundation on the pads, but it's not building up in a crazy way. It's not super overwhelming on like the low end. And so I'll play with that a lot as we start to kind of build up and get really big, and I want that to kind of become bigger and more defined, the pad. Then I can roll that back. And we can hear those chord definition really come out. And we can kind of add the drone in. Really, such a goal for me in all of this was to have all of the changes be very fluid and nothing dramatic, because that can be a thing too. If we're dramatically changing sounds and you feel this pad drop out, it can kind of be distracting. So I wanted all of those changes to be really kind of subtle and almost to where you didn't notice that it was happening. So at this point, we haven't really heard anything super dramatic change, but I've completely pulled my pad out and I'm just playing with the drone now. I can start to bring it back in slowly. So that's kind of a little bit of an overlook on what's happening with my pads and pianos. I've got a couple synth sounds that I'll pull out on maybe some of our faster songs, kind of this OB based, kind of brighter synth. It's kind of fun to play around with. Only use that on a handful of songs. Again, there's not like this huge library of sounds. We do use tracks on a lot of our songs, and so there's a lot of kind of synth programming that we'll just kind of let Tracks World cover. And my main focus is when all of that goes away, the sounds I'm using are still full. They can still kind of fill out a moment and carry what's happening without it feeling like all the fullness is gone. So that's kind of what that looks like. I want to look at something that I call live piano dynamics, for lack of a better phrase. So as piano players, we love for our pianos to be dynamic, right? We love it the soft parts to be soft and the loud parts to really come alive. And the challenge that can provide sometimes is if we're too dynamic, then when we get really soft, our front of house audio guys completely lose us. And let's be fair for our audio guys. There's a lot happening back there, and we can't expect them to always be like listening for me, right? I can't hear myself in the house. Well, you got really quiet, and he's also mixing, 6 other vocals and the whole drum kit and a whole band of music. So we kind of want to help out as much as we can. So there's a couple ways that you would typically maybe do that to keep a piano from getting super, super loud. You could throw it through a compressor. The problem with that is some pianos, in order to really control it, it gets really squashed sounding and kind of compresses the life out of it. And so we don't really want to do that. So a trick that I picked up from an engineer friend a couple years back was the idea of using velocity control to limit how big our pianos are getting. So all pianos, whether it's a hardware piano or a software piano, it's all getting its information from the MIDI notes that are being transmitted by the keyboard, right? And so some keyboards have like a velocity curve that you can customize or you can play around with to kind of affect how loud that internal piano is getting. In software world, it's really cool because most any program that you're going to use to host your keys, whether it's MainStage or Ableton or anything else, is going to have something built in that lets you kind of control the velocity. So what I have is for each of my piano plugins, as I'm kind of building the sound and putting it all together, I've gone through and inserted a kind of a velocity utility that says you're not going to go any louder than whatever I set it at. So for the Woodchester, for instance, I'm maxed out at 114. So even if I play louder than a velocity of 114, this plugin is never going to generate anything louder than a velocity of 114. So I'm not compressing the sound. I'm just keeping it from triggering those ultra loud samples in its own library. So for each instrument, I'll go through and do that and find the sweet spot to where no matter how hard I play here, it feels controlled. It still feels punchy. It feels good to me as a player. Like when I dig in, it still gives me something back. But it's helpful to not overpower front of house. There's there is some compression that it goes through just for some smoothing and some glue. But the starting point for me is always the velocity. So that's kind of what I do at the plugin level. But then in addition to that, right here at the very beginning of the whole chain of any piano that's inserted in this rack has to run through this velocity plugin first. And this velocity plugin is mapped to this knob right here. And you can see as I dial this back, it's going to limit the max velocity even further. I can go completely off. And it's just not barely going to trigger anything, right? So technically 2 is all the way. You can hear it just real faint. So we go from full on. As I dial it back, you can feel it softening. That's really helpful because there's sometimes like ministry times where I want it to feel soft and delicate, but you know how hard it is sometimes to I gotta try and play really soft, and if I accidentally go too loud, especially with a wrong note, it's just bad. And so this lets me not have to be as sensitive here with how hard I'm hitting the keys. Like I'm actually hitting that pretty hard, and it's still staying pretty soft. So I can actually play hitting the keys decently hard, and it's keeping it from really getting too overpowering. So that's really helpful. Let's look at another thing that's been really cool. Not super revolutionary. Obviously, we've all probably heard on so many different things, a piano playing an octave lead line, right? Like that's all over the place. kind of my approach to that, to keep it simple and to keep me from having to stare down at the key bed. And I'm honestly not a hyper technical player, so I will mess up notes if I try to get over ambitious and play an octave lead line that's either too fast to be able to play it fluidly or super accurately. So I wanted to be able to keep my head focused forward, making calls, MDing. And so I wanted to also be able to like have some extra punch if I am playing a lead line. So I have these two channels over here that receive the incoming MIDI from the Nord and then forward it over to these two piano racks. And I have these clips that basically say where that split point is going to be, what first note is going to be octaved. I don't want to put an octave on the entire keyboard because then everything I'm playing, chords, bass notes, are all going to have an octave to them, and that's just going to be way too much. So let's look at what this is. So I can figure out for each song, what lead line am I going to be playing? What's the lowest note that I'm going to need to play that I want an octave on? And I can set it at that point. So when I recall that patch, it's going to go straight to that preset point. So let's look at Mighty Name of Jesus. We might be playing this lead line. So that note right there, that B flat 2 is going to be the lowest note that I'm going to play a lead on. So then I have this button here, this toggle button that turns those two channels on or off, which allows the octave MIDI to then pass through to the piano rack. So now we have that octave coming in. Notice these are not, so I still have normal chord voicings down here. Okay, so that's really, really helpful to be able to kind of bring in some solid leads, intro lead lines, like intro for More of You. Same thing. Without the octave. Like, still sounds great, but that extra pop of that octave coming in just really helps it stand out in a way, and I don't have to try and do because it actually even allows me to kind of keep more of my right hand available for chord voicings underneath that. It's really, really helpful when we're playing with a pad too, right? Because if we try and do octaves and our pads on, like that, all that octave information is going to our pad too. And so it can start to poke out in a really weird way versus then I can actually be holding a chord voice down for my pad. So it just kind of opens that up a little bit, lets us be able to kind of join in on leads, bring those voices forward without muddying up our pads or the other chord voicings that we're trying to play. So that's been really, really helpful, very usable in a lot of worship music. So on the effects side, nothing super crazy. I do have a delay available for my piano that I can bring in, a little bit of verb. I don't do a ton of delay unless it's like a lead line that really needs something. So might do it a little bit just for a little bit of atmosphere, more felt than heard. But that's really the extent of the effects. Nothing really crazy beyond that. One thing I want to look at, because it's really been a cool thing that has kind of even opened up the world. When we first got Nords at church, it was my first time ever getting to play around with a Nord. And I know a lot of people love Nords. There's people out there that really don't care for Nords. That's great. This can actually kind of work with whatever keyboard you're working with. And that's kind of the idea of going, okay, I've established this workflow. So I've got my iPad recalling my patches, so I don't have to be messing with my laptop or be overthinking anything over here. I've got my faders controlling my volumes and my filters, my dynamics. What if I want to use hardware pianos too? Well, normally we might just go, well, I've got to run those into a different channel. They're going to be independent of the software, or maybe I might have a little sub mixer up here where I've got my laptop going into channel 1, Nord going into channel 2, and I've got to blend them myself. And the Nord is just going to sound like whatever the Nord sounds like. And that's great. For me, I wanted to incorporate the Nord into my workflow. To where if I wanted the Nord piano on, I press a button on the iPad. I don't have to try and bring the volume up or recall a patch. A lot of hardware keyboards, including the Nord Stage 2, which is what we're using here, does not do seamless patch changes. So if I needed to like change to a different piano or change to a different thing, you'd have to change patches and then all the sound drops out. Then your new sound is there. So it's not as fluid, not as smooth. So I was like, how can I incorporate the Nord, specifically the pianos, but still maintain the same workflow and not have to have more things to remember? Is my Nord up? Is my Nord down? A lot of those patch changes, at least for me, are happening in like song transitions. So it's not the only thing I'm doing. I'm calling transition reminders for the band, new key, here's the song we're headed into, band energy up top, fire tracks. So I'm like, I can't be thinking of 5 more things to do to recall my own sound. That was kind of the thing that influenced incorporating it this way. Most all keyboards have a setting called local control. And you might be familiar with that. If you're not, local control basically is the built-in key bed, whether or not it's triggering its own internal sounds directly, or if it's only sending MIDI information out your MIDI outputs. If local control is on, then it's triggering its own sounds internally. It's the default setting on all keyboards. When you turn it on, you hit the key bed, it makes sound. I can turn that off though. I can tell it, don't trigger your own sounds. You're just gonna send MIDI information. So now you can see the Nord piano volume is up. I've got my patch on, but you're not hearing anything. It's because it's not triggering its own sounds. So what we wanna do is we wanna take the MIDI from the Nord, we wanna run it through our Ableton session, and then Ableton, or whatever program you're using, can then send the MIDI back into the Nord when we tell it to. So I have clips set up that basically send a MIDI signal back into the Nord. And the thing that's cool about the Stage 2s, and I think on the new Stage 4s, is that you can route over here. You have your different sections, right? You got the organ section, piano section, and synth section. And I'm kind of covering this up with my iPad. But you can specify different MIDI channels to trigger those sounds. So I am sending MIDI into Ableton so here's the global MIDI on USB channel 1. So that's the channel that's being sent to my session. I am sending it back over here. So this is Nord panel A. So whatever piano I have loaded up on this patch for panel A or slot A, it is sending it out MIDI channel 2. So over here I can go, I want piano A for slot A to receive on MIDI channel 2. And the piano on slot B to receive on MIDI channel 3. So then over here I have Nord B sending on MIDI channel 3. So if I recall this clip, it's going to send out to slot A. And this is, again, we have local control off. So it doesn't matter that I'm actually looking at slot A or B over here. It all comes down to what Ableton is sending back. So then if we want to recall B, and now that's sending to slot B, which is a grand, the white grand. So here's the upright. Just the pearl upright is what I'm using there. And then the white grand. So then if I do piano off here, it turns the piano off. So I can maintain the same workflow with patch recall on my iPad. I can just program into my song patches whether I want it to use the Nord piano or all software or a combination of the two. And the thing that's even cool as we kind of go back in our conversation about piano layering, if I didn't run it this way, if I just ran the Nord straight into Ableton with local control on, you would actually, if I tried to layer a software piano with the Nord piano, you would actually hear it kind of flamming. It wouldn't be aligned properly because with any software instrument, there's going to be a certain amount of latency versus a hardware piano has basically no latency. So you're taking a piano with no latency and you're trying to layer it with a piano that does have latency. So it's never going to hit at the exact same time. So you really couldn't layer the Nord piano with any software piano. But by running it through this way, I'm actually able to do that if I want to. And then the other thing is I'm actually bringing the audio from the Nord back into this session. So this first slot up here, it's receiving the incoming sound from the Nord. It's combining that out to my piano output along with all of my software pianos. So it's going through the same output processing chain. I have access to run it through the same effects, the same octave. That's what this channel is over here. It's receiving the Nord MIDI and sending it over here to the Nord pianos. So then that octave information is being sent out on these channels along with everything else I'm playing. So it glues the Nord sounds in with your software sounds and makes it feel cohesive and part of the same space. And it's also, you can see over here on these, I have the ability to limit that maximum velocity that's going back to the Nord, just like I can with the software instruments. And with Nord, specifically the grand pianos, that can really be a thing. Some of their grand pianos are beautiful, but they're very dynamic. And so you can really dig in. And like we talked about, we can really make it difficult for our front of house engineer by those volume spikes being too aggressive. I have all of the same controls over the Nord pianos and the Nord sounds as I would my software sounds. So that became really, really helpful for me to incorporate the Nord sounds in with my software stuff. I didn't have to kind of separate those out and remember to control all of it separately. That's kind of an overview of how I'm running the keys, all of my main sounds, and hopefully that's helpful.
Guys, thanks again for being a part of this whole episode. If you made it to the end, congratulations, because most people do not make it to the end. If you enjoyed it, let us know. Give us a like. Follow Evan Fernald on Instagram. He's got a YouTube, by the way. He's got an amazing cover, Planet Shakers cover from like 9 years ago.
Wow.
He said he just posted it and just forgot about it. You were offloading it or something.
I was rehearsing. I recorded my rehearsal, and I wanted to get it off my phone, so I uploaded it to YouTube to get it off my phone.
And there you go.
There it is.
So check that out if you want to. But next episode with Evan right here is all about Tracks World. So if you want to know, man, I love Belonging Co. How do they run their tracks? I want to know how they flow because everything sounds so good, but yet they're able to flow. Well, next episode's all about that. So we'll see you guys there.